Hello and welcome. The Indian education sector has been embroiled in a series of controversies over the past few months. The HRD minister has been jumping from one fire to the next. If there's one sector in India that we need to set right, that is the education sector. And that's the one sector where the government is currently being accused of pushing its own RSS agenda. Does the government have its priorities wrong? What needs to be done to ensure that all children in India have access to high quality education? That's what we'll discuss in the big education face-off here at the Teach for India annual program. Joining us today, I want to begin by introducing our guests. We've got Nalin Kohli from the Bharatiya Janata Party, Professor Yogender Yadav from the Aam Aadmi Party, and Manish Tiwari from the Congress. Can we have a round of applause for all our guests, please? We'll start first and foremost with you, Nalin. Because if you see all that the HRD minister and the HRD ministry has done since the time you got elected in May, has been to try and push an RSSization of Indian education. Try and change history books, try and change curricula. Instead of focusing on getting teachers to teach more, getting them to be more productive, motivating them, ensuring that more students come to class, your only interest seems to be to correct the supposed wrongs of the Congress's education policy. Do you not have your policies all wrong?
Yeah. So let's go back to the top of it. I think education has been in the news for a long time, not just the last 6 months. Everyone is accusing the government of what they like. Let's wait and see. There is a new education policy that has to come. When the education policy comes, then please take a decision, whether it is saffronization, which is a term that is used against the BJP and anyone from the BJP, even Sanskrit, because my understanding is there are more Sanskrit scholars in Germany and the USA. I don't know how are we responsible for saffronizing either Germany or the USA, but so be it. We are used to allegations. We've faced allegations all our lives.
So you're accepting that you're pushing a saffron agenda in education?
No, I never said that. You're free to draw any conclusion. We are in a democracy and that's the beauty of it. We can live with any kind of controversy. The fact is, what will be government policy has to be judged on government policy, not on the basis of what others perceive government policy might be.
Professor Yogender Yadav, Nalin argues that so far the education policy hasn't come out. So to level serious charges of saffronization, when so far all we've heard is noise, there's ambience, but you haven't heard the policy yet. So how can Nalin and his party be accused of pushing a saffron agenda?
Rahul, I'll actually join Nalin in one thing, that we are looking at something serious about educational agenda. And the one thing I really appreciate what he said, let this not become a political tutu meme. This is not what we are here for. And I actually will grant his government some time to come up with a policy, and to do a thorough critique is something which should follow that. I actually appreciate what he's saying. My own sense, I mean, if you want me to comment on this short-term thing, my own sense as someone who has had something to do with education is, unfortunately, most governments in this country have indulged in gimmicks when it comes to education. And this all talk about saffronization is also one of those tiny gimmicks. Let me say it's harmless. Although I know a lot of discussion would happen, simply because most of this newfound excitement about traditions is accompanied by complete illiteracy about those traditions. So actually nothing would happen. The serious questions of education remain there. And I really would like, in a discussion of this kind, for us to address the more serious, enduring questions of education, for which no one has appetite, for which no one has time, for which no one seems to have bandwidth. I'm happy that you brought in politicians, because I do believe that the heart of the problem resides in politics when it comes to education. There is lack of political will, let's face it. And therefore, the beginning has to be from politics, but not from political tutu meme.
Okay, Manish, is it a gimmick, what we've seen so far, or do you see the beginning of a very dangerous agenda where India is being pushed towards a saffron education policy?
Well, Rahul, allow me to commence by saying that when you're dealing with 1.2 billion people and a demographic pyramid which leans heavily in favor of the young, a demographic dividend which is not going to plateau out till 2039, you have a humongous challenge on your hands. So under those circumstances, what you would have expected is that once a new government takes office, it tries to set out or tries to articulate a vision that it has in its mind as to how they are going to deal with the education sector over the next 5 years. Are they going to continue what the UPA was doing? If they are not going to continue what the UPA was doing, are they going to critique what they thought was wrong? If they're going to critique what was wrong, are they going to come up with an alternative policy paradigm? Unfortunately, you've not seen any of that happen. I have not heard the Human Resource Development Minister, or for that matter the Prime Minister, really unveiling a grand vision statement with regard to education. What you've in fact heard is very sporadic attempts, I would not even call it saffronization, but basically trivializing the educational challenge. For example, if Angela Merkel decides to go off to watch football, rather than meeting the Prime Minister in Munich when he lands, then you have German getting knocked off the agenda of the school curriculum.
You think that's why Smriti Irani did it?
I'm not saying, but all I'm trying to say
is what lawyers do. They say it and they say no, we didn't say it.
All I'm trying to say
you may also introduce, I'm also an advocate, so there's an answer coming.
So all I'm trying to say, well, Nalin is a lawyer too. I see him in the Supreme Court these days, arguing very well and passionately. But be that as it may, the moot point is that in 6 months, and 6 months is a fairly long time, 180 days, we should have heard something substantial.
That's very important. I want to put that question to them.
And that is not what we've heard, and that really is the tragedy.
The reason that
Rob, just can I come in for a minute? I think I like what he said, which is trivialization of education. I mean, this is not confined to one party, but yeah, that's the real challenge.
The reason that some of these aspects are being picked on is because your government hasn't so far laid out a vision for education. Let's see what Manish just said. This big controversy over German being knocked off as the third language in Kendra Vidyalayas. Now, what is your problem if any child studies German? Why not allow those children to study German? And if you have to make a change, why make it in the middle of the academic year?
How do you have a 3-model formula? How does that go? It goes under the constitutional framework of what are the Indian languages under the 8th schedule. That's simple as that. German is not one of those 8 specified by the Constitution of India, which I did not write, you did not write. It's written and it's there by the will of the people of India through their leaders way back in 1950.
But the question
let me answer German. No, this is
I am on German.
No, I am coming on German. So therefore, the first thing is, 3 years ago, without looking at it not coming as, it shouldn't have come as a third language, it should have come as an additional language, not the third language. In the middle of the year, which is September, it should have been launched at the beginning of the year. So when the new government is faced with renewal, the government has 2 choices before it. A, do we continue with what is patently, inherently wrong in a process and therefore agree with the agreement to go on when it is wrong in law? Or do we say, scrap it now, let's come up with a model that is agreeable in law? Now the point is, it can't be the third language.
No, but so why do it in the middle of an academic year?
No, by your logic,
answer that question. Why do it in the middle of an academic year?
Same, in St. Stephen's College, go out there, make a juggi jopri right in the middle of year, which is not allowed to be done, and then later on say, now that an illegal thing has happened, let's live with that illegal thing. Governments don't work like that, at least not with the right intent. There is no agenda against language of German. There can't be and there shouldn't be in a globalized world.
Though Nalin has tried to make a very passionate defense, it's unfortunately come out as an exercise in chicanery for the simple reason.
Let's talk about the legal points.
For the simple reason that if there is a problem with German, how come French is continuing to be taught? How come Mandarin is continuing to be taught? How come Spanish is continuing to be taught? So therefore, if you, hang on, don't interrupt. If you have a problem, I don't think French is there in the schedule of Indian languages. I do not think Mandarin is there in the schedule of Indian languages. I do not think Spanish is there in the schedule of Indian languages. How come my daughter till class 10 had French as a third language? She had English, she had Hindi, and she had French. And if I understand her school curricula correctly, children still continue to learn French. So therefore, possibly the French president met the Prime Minister more properly than the German Chancellor. So French still continues to be there and German is out.
Professor Yogendra Yadav, even though you now come from a political party, who do you think is right and wrong over here? The BJP says the manner in which the UPA implemented the policy was wrong and therefore we need to correct it. The UPA says you shouldn't have done it, and in any case, at a time when India is globalizing, the more young kids learn foreign languages, the better it is.
Rahul, the problem lies with the question itself. Who is wrong? And once again, allow me to say, this is one more instance of trivialization of education. What is the language question? I mean, there's a serious language problem in our education system. What is the problem? Large number of children do not study in their mother tongue. Someone's mother tongue is Tulu, Santali, Hadoti. They go and study standard languages, which introduces a big gap. Number two, large number of Indians, to 80% of our universities work through Indian languages, and they are examined through a language that they have not studied in. Unequal access to English is a serious problem. Lack of international exposure to international languages is a serious issue. And what do we debate in this country? Sanskrit versus German. And in the manner in which I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. Allow me to say, I mean, I don't normally get angry. I learned my alphabets in English in class 6. I studied in BA with Hindi medium. I know what it means to come to this city, having studied in a Hindi medium school. I know what it means to enter higher education as someone who didn't speak English with the right accent. And I know what kind of inequality it causes. And then when I hear these reports and I look at these debates, I don't know whether I wish to laugh or cry. And about Sanskrit, yes, Sanskrit ought to be promoted. If it is not promoted in India, where else would it be promoted? But is this the way to promote Sanskrit? To give rote learning in class 8 to 10 when they learn 5 shlokas and get 95% marks? How ridiculous can we get?
You've been an educationist yourself, Nalin. Why don't you tell us from your perspective? Let's for a moment leave the government and the party aside.
Sure.
From your perspective, Nalin, what do you believe needs to be done to try and fix the problems of primary education?
Kids do come into classes wanting to learn. Then suddenly a structure starts saying, you can't learn this, you can't ask questions. All your life you tell enjoying a child who's born asking questions. The minute they come of age, you say, shut up, don't ask this, do this. Don't ask this, don't do this. Where is creativity coming in all to it? These are serious questions. And as he said, it requires actually thought. Mr. Yadav and I can also disagree, but there will be so many areas that we'll agree on. Because that involves a child. The child is the most important human resource on which you build everything. So right to education, yes, good it's come. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, good it came. But it just can't be only numbers. Look at people conduct examinations now and say a class 5 kid does not know what happens in class 2. What's the point of just numbers? The end result is that person has to be a better human being, equipped to take the challenges of life ahead. That's what education is. It's just not literacy. Otherwise, ask any elderly person, they'll say, in 1950, there were less literate people, more educated people. Today, there are more literate people. Where are the educated people?
Professor Yadav.
I wanted to say that in primary education and in school education in general, we have reduced the entire emphasis to having schools. So while we have a right to education, actually what we have got is right to school. There is a school, there is a building, and sometimes we also want to ensure that there are Master Ji inside that building. But what happens after that? What happens inside the classroom, whether something is transacted or not? Do we get to know whether children are learning anything at all or not? This is nowhere. I mean, so our failure as a society, as a polity, is our inability to focus on these soft but the real issues of education. Unless we begin to pay attention to those issues, enrollment is no longer quite a challenge. It's almost done. The real issue now is about quality. How do we need to measure outcomes or not? There is a big debate. There is a debate. Let's try and get into it.
We need to get into it.
What should be the medium of instruction? There is a huge debate. What should be the curricula? Unfortunately, much of our education from schooling to higher education is about catching up. We thought we were catching up with UK, then we started catching up with US, and now we're trying to catch up with China, which is catching up with US. I mean, I really thought someone like Rabindranath Tagore had much better sense of education. you know, which is education for this country, and which is this deeper agenda of Indianization, not Mr. Batra's agenda, and I don't see why we should be discussing him in such a serious show. I think the serious agenda of Indianization is to take our context, our need, and our intellectual resources seriously. No country can build modern education without taking its own intellectual resources, without paying sufficient attention to its needs, to its context. This is what serious Indianization of education should be about. And therefore, I really wish we were to spend some time discussing A, quality of education, and secondly, content of education. What is worth teaching? What is to be learned?
Whereas what needs to be looked at is, when you had those 10 years in power, the problems that you've left Smriti Irani, Nalin and the BJP with, which they're trying to deal with now.
Well, let me address two issues. First of all, Dr. Yadav spoke about curricula. I think you raised a question with regard to curricula which went unanswered. The second is with regard to quality of education. Now, I am not that much of a cynic as some people are with regard to quality. I have had the occasion of actually going around visiting village schools, and I used to do it on a fairly regular basis. And before I started doing that, I also had this view that village schools are places where children do not go, where classrooms are non-existent, where teachers do not teach. But pleasantly, I was surprised to the contrary. In fact, what we found was that on an average, you had about an 85 to 90% attendance level. Yes, it's a different matter that most of the children going to government schools were from scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, or the other backward classes. The other sections of society were actually sending their children to private schools, thinking that that gives them access to better education. There were teachers out there. In fact, I was quite pleasantly surprised to see that teachers, who are possibly the biggest whipping instrument of all the critics of the education policy, are in fact going beyond the call of their duty to try and give children whatever best that they can impart, given the kind of training which they had. You had school desks which were not broken. You had children wearing clean uniforms. You had children getting access to hot cooked meals. So therefore, it is not that the entire government story with regard to education is a complete disaster. But yes, I do acknowledge that what you require is really public-private partnerships. For example, what Inspire is doing in terms of sending professionals out to teach in government schools, what you in fact require is an advancement on this model whereby you actually get corporate entities or people as a part of their corporate social responsibility agenda or not-for-profits to actually start adopting whole schools and then bringing them up to speed. So therefore, there is a substantive amount of work which remains to be done on the foundation that has been laid over the years. And that's what you're not hearing, unfortunately, from this government, that how do they intend to take this entire story forward?
Actually, I just wanted to make a point and then ask a question. As regards government policies are concerned, this government has started two of the policies which might be game changer. Like one is Shal Darpan and second is developing the principal of the school as a leader of the school, who will be responsible for developing the school. And second, my question is, what do you people think as policy framers and policy makers, what should be done by the government so that in the primary education, focus is more on developing the thought process and a free thinking child rather than just quantitative outcomes?
I believe that the focus should be in primary education. We pay our primary teachers the least, and I don't know why. I've never been able to understand this. That at the primary level, teachers these ladies and gents, very few of them unfortunately, but when they're dealing with kids, here are the kids whose maximum learning age, and you pay them the lowest salaries I can't understand why. Why do we have the PRT teacher, as it's called, getting the lowest salary when she probably does the maximum amount of work? Dealing with kids all the time, getting them to learn, and the joy of it. I mean, another question, which I don't know, it's not related to your question. But I have in my mind is, where are we heading also? When, you know, even innocence is being lost in schools. I mean, look at the horrific incidents we are hearing about schools. You're taking away even the little faith that is there in institutions because of the way. Aberrations to teachers. Everyone goes to school looking up to a teacher. We have had, I can say that a teacher made me. I looked at beyond, someone sparked ambition in me, somebody sparked talent in me, somebody did it, and I grew up subsequently every year looking and saying, I hope I will one day be like this, or like that. After parents, it's a tripartite equation. There's the child, there's the parent, and there is the school, represented by the teacher. It's a harmonious, beautiful thing, but somewhere there is a disconnect. It's not happening.
I am Priyanka. I am 15 years old. I am a 10th grade student from Pune, and I am a Teach for India Maya student. I think today I consider myself very fortunate to speak out, because I really feel that when we have discussions about education, we all think what the great policymakers think or what the adults or what teachers think, but I feel that you all should consider what children feel about education. I have friends who study in municipal schools. I study in a private school, a low-income private school. I know some kids who study in really good schools. But none of them feel that they are getting good education, because I feel that nobody is happy. Even when I ask my friends from a municipal school, they say that no, they are not happy with their education, nor is a kid studying in a really good private school. Why? Because everywhere there's only one thing happening, and that is we have to study whatever is given in our books. But and I think all the kids, I've done a survey in our school, I asked all my friends, why do you come to school? And one answer that I got was from everybody, to make a way to earn money in our lives. Is that the purpose of education? Do we want to go to school for earning or for learning? And I think it's very important that all the teachers and all the people in this across the world understand that if the students are not understanding the point of education, then there's no point in sending them to school and getting good marks. Because there are some engineers, there are some good qualified doctors who feel that they didn't get the education because they were only taught to become best as they can be, but they were never taught that they have to be good human beings. Where are the values in the education system? And if we decide of making the education system really, really good, but if the children are unhappy, then there's no point in all these discussions.
Can we have a round of applause for our teacher? Yes, so how are you going to her happy, Nalin?
It's a tough one. I'm battling questions about happiness in this country, about how do we make an average Indian happy. I mean, everyone's dealing with some challenge or the other, but she's right. That's
so
exactly
Nalin,
what I was
realizing how
saying.
tough it is, Manish, to be in government.
No.
Now, when he was in opposition, I can promise you, if this was just 6 months ago and Nalin was in opposition, he would have had all the...